Hello and welcome to Prepspot. In this video, we are going to know about one of the most discussed and significant political promises made in recent Indian political history, Rahul Gandhi's proposal to dismantle the Supreme Court-imposed 50% cap on reservations. This issue has taken center stage over the past year, and even though the elections have come and gone, it continues to remain highly relevant in the national discourse, especially among students, aspirants, and citizens interested in public policy, constitutional matters, and social justice. So let's dive into this topic with a comprehensive and analytical perspective. Now, Rahul Gandhi, a prominent leader of the Indian National Congress and a key figure in the opposition alliance known as the India Bloc, made headlines during the 2024 Lok Sabha election campaign with a strong and, some would say, radical commitment. He promised that if voted to power, his government would remove the 50% limit on reservations in education and public sector employment. This cap was set by the Supreme Court back in 1992 in a landmark judgment, and it has remained a legal benchmark for more than 3 decades. Gandhi's proposal aimed to make room for increasing quotas for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward classes, and possibly other disadvantaged communities based on the findings of a future caste census. This promise, understandably, triggered widespread discussions, not just among political commentators and legal experts, but also among ordinary citizens. Supporters argue that lifting the cap is necessary to ensure fair representation of historically marginalized communities, especially since the demographic data suggests that many of these groups remain underrepresented despite existing reservations. Critics, on the other hand, raise concerns about meritocracy, reverse discrimination, and the potential erosion of equality in competitive sectors. So what exactly is the background of this cap, and why is this promise such a big deal? Let's start with the basics. The concept of reservations in India dates back to the pre-independence era, with thinkers like Jyotirao Phule advocating for proportional representation of backward castes in education and public employment. Post-independence, the Indian constitution formally recognized reservations for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Later, following the recommendations of the Mandal Commission in 1979, a 27% reservation was implemented for other backward classes in 1990. However, in the landmark 1992 case of Indra Sahni v. Union of India, the Supreme Court ruled that total reservations should not exceed 50%, stating that while affirmative action is essential, it must be balanced with the principle of equality enshrined in Articles 14, 15, and 16 of the Constitution. This 50% ceiling has since become a defining feature of India's reservation policy. It's intended as a safeguard to maintain balance between social justice and open competition. However, it's worth noting that some exceptions already exist. Tamil Nadu, for instance, operates with a 69% reservation structure under a special law protected in the 9th schedule of the Constitution. So while the 50% cap is widely upheld, it is not entirely unbreakable. Rahul Gandhi's promise came during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections and was reiterated during the Jharkhand Assembly elections held later that year. Although the Congress-led India Bloc did not win at the national level, they did secure a significant victory in Jharkhand, winning 56 out of 81 seats. This victory potentially opens the door for state-level policy discussions, though any substantive change to the national reservation cap would require constitutional amendments or judicial reinterpretation, neither of which is easy or straightforward. Now let's look at the numbers. According to the 2011 census and Mandal Commission estimates, scheduled castes comprise about 16.6% of the population, scheduled tribes about 8.6%, and other backward classes around 52%, though the exact figure for OBCs remains debated due to the absence of a recent caste census. This results in a demand for higher representation from communities that feel they are not proportionately accommodated within the current 49.5% reserved quota. On top of that, the 103rd Constitutional Amendment in 2019 introduced a 10% reservation for economically weaker sections or EWS, which pushed the total reservation quota to 59.5% in some areas, though this EWS category is considered distinct from caste-based reservations and was upheld by the Supreme Court in 2022. So, when Gandhi proposes lifting the cap, it's rooted in the belief that existing reservation limits do not reflect the actual demographic and social realities of modern India. This promise is often linked with his repeated calls for a nationwide caste census, something that hasn't been done since 1931. Such data, he argues, would provide a factual basis to recalibrate reservation policies according to the population share of different communities. In short, his position is, measure first, then allocate based on need and representation. However, the legal and procedural hurdles are enormous. Changing the cap would likely require a constitutional amendment, which needs a 2/3 majority in both houses of parliament. Given the current composition, where the NDA holds 293 seats in the Lok Sabha and maintains significant influence in the Rajya Sabha, passing such an amendment appears improbable without broader political consensus. Alternatively, a fresh interpretation by the Supreme Court could potentially shift the legal understanding of the cap, especially if presented with compelling socio-economic data. But as seen in the 2021 Maratha reservation case, the court has shown a tendency to defend the 50% threshold vigorously. Politically, this promise is a calculated move by the Congress to consolidate support among reserved category voters, particularly OBCs, who, despite their numbers, are believed to be underrepresented in public institutions. It also speaks to growing public interest in reservation reform. Multiple surveys and reports, like those from Lokniti and CSDS, have shown that affirmative action policies strongly influence electoral behavior, especially in rural constituencies. But there's always the other side of the coin. Expanding reservations may lead to unrest or backlash from unreserved groups who feel left out of the benefits of social policy and already face stiff competition. What's important to understand here is that the reservation debate in India is not just about policy, it's about identity, representation, and a vision for the future of Indian democracy. Proponents of lifting the cap argue that true equality cannot be achieved unless those historically kept out of power structures are given proportionate access. Opponents, meanwhile, warn that over-reliance on quotas can damage meritocracy, breed resentment, and perpetuate caste divisions instead of eliminating them. There are also technical nuances to consider. For example, even though the 103rd Amendment made room for 10% EWS reservation outside the 50% limit, it applied to individuals not covered under SC and OBC quotas. This strategic framing allowed the Supreme Court to uphold the amendment by saying that it did not interfere with existing reservations. But extending this logic to increase quotas for SCs, STs, or OBCs would almost certainly invite judicial review. The judiciary, in past rulings, has emphasized the ceiling principle as a safeguard against excessive compartmentalization of society. It's also worth mentioning that states have tried to bypass this limitation in creative ways. Some use the Ninth Schedule to shield laws from judicial review, although the Supreme Court has ruled that even Ninth Schedule laws are subject to scrutiny if they violate the basic structure of the Constitution. Maharashtra's attempt to introduce Maratha reservations above the cap was struck down in 2021 for this reason. So, any attempt to raise the quota ceiling must be backed by strong legal and social justification. So where do we stand today, in April 2025? Despite Rahul Gandhi's high-decibel campaign promises and the Jharkhand win, the national policy remains unchanged. The Supreme Court's 50% limit is still in force. No bill to amend the constitution in this regard has been introduced in Parliament. However, discussions continue in policy forums, academic circles, and political platforms. Think tanks are exploring the implications of a caste census, and public interest litigations may soon bring the issue back to the courts. What lies ahead? Well, the road is complex. If the Congress or the India bloc gains more parliamentary strength in the future, they might revisit this agenda. A caste census, once conducted, could give their proposal a stronger empirical foundation. Meanwhile, the BJP-led NDA is unlikely to support such a drastic policy shift, given its own emphasis on merit, economic criteria, and social cohesion. That said, the fact that the 103rd Amendment passed under the NDA government does suggest a certain degree of flexibility in the reservation framework, provided it's carefully framed. In conclusion, Rahul Gandhi's promise to dismantle the 50% reservation cap is a bold and strategic political maneuver that appeals to a large segment of the electorate seeking greater representation. But translating this into actual policy involves a series of legal, constitutional, and social hurdles. The current government may not be on board, the judiciary may resist, and public opinion is divided. However, this issue is far from over. As India continues to grapple with questions of equality, justice, and identity, the debate over reservation limits will remain a key part of the national conversation. Answer this question in comments. The correct answer will be given hot and pinned. Lastly, we just want to let you know that we are a newly emerging online platform for competitive exams. Creating educational explainer videos like these requires a lot of effort, money, and time. If you like these videos and want us to excel and create videos in all categories of competitive exams, then you can consider supporting us with a one-time donation through the Ko-fi platform and also by becoming a member through Patreon. This will help us create more such informative educational videos in the competitive exams space. So, one last time, subscribe and share this channel with all your friends who are preparing for competitive exams. And also, follow us on social media platforms. The links are given in the About section of the channel and also in the video description. So, see you in the next video.